You have taste in a way that's meaningful to software people.
You never heard this song?
Hello, I'm Bill Gates.
You never listened to the podcast?
I would recommend TypeScript. Yeah, it writes a lot of code for me, and usually it's slightly wrong.
I'm reminded, incidentally, of Rust here.
Rust.
This almost makes me happy that I didn't become a supermodel.
Cooper and Netties.
Well, I'm sorry, guys. I don't know what's going on.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today about large neural networks. It's really an honor to be here.
Rust.
DataTopics. Welcome to the Data.
Welcome to the DataTopics podcast.
Hello and welcome to DataTopics Unplugged, the summer edition. Your casual corner of the web where we discuss all about AI predictions in sports. My name is Murillo. I'll be hosting you today. I'm joined by Tim, fan favorite, friend of the pod. What's up, Tim? How are you?
I'm doing good, thank you.
And I'm joined by first-time joiner,
Yep.
Sander. How are you doing, Sander?
I'm good.
Nervous?
No, not at all.
Oh, not at all. He's
Never is.
He's used to the big stages
Yeah.
already. Maybe, Tim, you joined us in the past, but maybe for the people that have forgotten or people that missed the opportunity, the pleasure that it was to talk to you the first time, would you mind giving the people a bit of a background?
I vaguely remember that I am 0.81 Samstal. But that's maybe a bit of a throwback. I don't know if you do that anymore.
I think it was hard to keep up.
It was hard to keep up. Okay. I'm Tim. I work in the commercial department of DataRoots, which means that I am, today you're not going to hear the very technical statements from me or the very technically accurate lingo. I'm here as resident NBA expert. I've been informed by Murillo, so I have a big passion for sports analytics, especially in basketball. So with the addition that we're going to have, I hope that's going to be a relevant experience.
I'm sure it will. And Sander,
Yes.
for the people that don't know you yet.
Is there people that don't know me?
But the people, like any life updates, just update the people. Your fans are like, man, Sander, tell me what happened with you. Like, what's up?
No. So I'm Sander. I'm a DataRoots, a data engineer, as well as the team lead of our platform team. But I'm also a big sports fan. I play football. I watch football like every weekend. So that's why I got involved.
Yes. I feel like you guys are saying, like, as I snatch you from the hall, it's like, you gotta sit, like, you gotta eat your broccoli, you gotta talk to me about sport. Maybe a bit too far, but so yeah, this is the DataTopics Unplugged, the summer edition, let's say. So we do have a bit of a different format. The Euro just finished, right? The Euro 2024. The big final was yesterday, was Spain and England. Maybe I'll just put on the screen here the brackets. And I want to say maybe how much... Alex, actually, do you remember how much time ago was the other Euro predictions? It was like 3 weeks ago, maybe a month or something. So I thought it would be interesting to kind of revisit and see how these AI predictions do. Mm-hmm. Also the plug with NBA. Tim's here, so we need to talk about NBA too. No, just kidding. But yeah, did they get it right? Did they get it wrong? So I was a bit curious in hearing your thoughts. I know, Sander, you also had some thoughts, and Tim as well. The first, congrats to Spain. Big winners.
The true mission of the DataTopics podcast is holding random Medium articles accountable for their predictions that they're making.
Finding those guys, you said that. Throw him, get him, cancel him. No, that's not the point. But I do think that predicting scores in sports, I think it's an interesting challenge. I think some sports are more challenging than others. I also think that there's probably some interesting reasons there. And even the more philosophical is like, do we want to make it easier to predict? Which we'll get to that in a bit. So cool. So maybe to start here, like I mentioned, we did have some predictions already. Namely, we had one prediction from, I want to say Snowflake, using Snowflake ML. Let me see if I can find the link. They had predicted, so I'm putting it on the screen as well. And we'll share the links as well as usual. They had predicted, I think I want to say Spain. No, not Spain.
England.
France.
England.
Yeah.
But
close.
Spain. It was either France, Portugal, or England. That was. They were
France, Portugal, or England.
Yes.
So
That was
yeah,
their,
this is it.
voilà.
There we go. And hands-on metro, Portugal won. France have come through several times in testing. If I had to pick a top 3 team winners, would be England, France. Maybe before the competition started, would you have agreed with this prediction or no?
Probably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You think Portugal would? You were very optimistic about Portugal as well.
I mean, I predicted the final to be England, Portugal.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh wow.
If you look at the pure quality of the
Yeah.
players that they have and where they play, which teams, then it really makes sense.
For Portugal?
Portugal, they have
Yeah,
a great roster.
Maybe I'm just out of touch. Who's the Portuguese stars? I guess.
But you have Bruno Fernandes, you have Bernardo Silva, you have
Leao.
Leao from AC
Leao's playing
Milan.
where? Milan. AC Milan.
AC Milan.
Yeah.
You have
Jota.
Diego Jota. You have, but you also Ruben Diaz, I think.
Pepe still.
Pepe
42 years
still.
old or something.
Man, Pepe, man, that guy is super old.
I mean, this
Yeah.
Euros, we got the record of the oldest outfield player as well as the youngest one.
Yeah, right. That's crazy.
That's
Yeah.
cool, huh?
So and the youngest one was the
Yamal.
Yamal. Yeah.
Man, his birthday was on Saturday.
Oh, really?
But-
So he became 17 years old on Saturday.
Whoa.
On Sunday, he became the youngest.
I promised you
Euro
that I
winner.
have a list of like random statistics, right?
All right, Tim, take us home.
He also, like, as a 16-year-old, he also made another record. He is the tied single tournament biggest assist giver, as in he gave 4 assists in the entire championship, and it's the highest for Spain ever, and it's the highest single tournament tied with others, and then don't know the others, but it's crazy.
Oh wow.
For
So he's also
the
the youngest scorer, right?
Ever.
In
Yeah, he's the youngest
Yeah.
everything, basically.
Man,
Yeah,
he's
yeah.
like 16.
the goal against France.
So if he was born, he's 16 and his birthday, he just turned 17. That means he was born in. Actually, I don't need to do the math.
Don't look, it's gonna be painful.
The Declan Rice in his interview before the game, he said something really funny. He said like, "Oh yeah, when COVID started, this guy was 12."
He was born in 2007.
That's
So
crazy, man. But did you see, like, he always got subbed in like the 80th minute? Did you see why?
no, why?
Like in Germany, it's like prohibited for like someone who's under the age of 18 to work past the hour of 11 o'clock in the evening. So that meant that,
No.
like, yeah.
Really?
So he had to be taken off because he had to shower before 11 o'clock. Because
Really?
Otherwise, he was breaking the law.
It's a law
But like, it's a
against
law in.
It's like
it's a law against child
just in
labor.
Germany, yeah,
In
just
Germany.
child labor.
So if the Euro wasn't in Germany and they had a different law in the other countries,
Yeah,
they'd have
yeah.
been fine.
Yeah.
Man.
Or if it would have been more strict
even
in
more
another
strict
country,
maybe.
it wouldn't. But they would have taken the fine probably. It was a 30K fine.
Yeah.
Still.
If
Wow.
you're up 3-0, it doesn't matter really.
So let's see. Popular 2007 movies. Spider-Man 3. That's when that's when he was born. The Bucket List. Yeah. Actually, Alex, do you know these films that I'm saying or no? It's just so. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. The B movie.
That B movie. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
The Underdog. Yeah, there's some. Resident Evil Extinction. All these movies were came out.
Damn.
Mr. Bean's Holidays. You know this one. Okay. Alex is like, whoa. Play that right now.
We put this up. We put this
Yeah,
up for
yeah,
the next
yeah.
like hour and a half.
Yeah. We're just gonna list movies from the rest of the podcast, actually. No, but indeed. So yeah, super young kid. It's crazy, yeah. Like, what was I doing at 16? I was like, maybe. Actually, I know an anecdote. I think it was Bayer Leverkusen. They also had a very, very young player. It was also in high school, and I remember they announced on Twitter. Maybe I can try to find it. It was a Champions League match. And they would put on Twitter like who's playing and who's not playing, who's out because of injuries, who's out because of yellow cards and all these things. And they're like, oh, this guy, they're recovering from injuries. This guy, they received a 3rd yellow. This guy's got a red card. And this guy, he cannot go because he has an important exam with the school the next day. Like, really.
I think Yamal as well, when he was still in
was
training
making
camp, he
homework,
was
yeah.
making homework.
Can you imagine he cannot be in the Euro final because the teacher gave him an exam the next day?
His grades were not good enough. He was grounded by his dad.
Yeah, it's like, you didn't do your chores. And all these things. Yeah. Florian Wirtz. Yeah.
He's
yeah.
pretty good as well right now.
Yeah. So, school exam made... Let me be sure this step instead.
He wasn't that good in the championship.
Yeah, but it says school exam made 17-year-old Florian Wirtz miss Leverkusen's Europa League clash. Yeah. It's funny, huh? I mean, it's funny, but it's good. In Brazil, that wouldn't fly. In Brazil, it'd be like, you're probably not in school anyways. if you're serious about football, you're probably not in school. Okay, so this is one. So actually, you put England and Portugal.
Yeah.
And actually, we can check it up, no? Because at DataRoots, I think we did a little predictions.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah, but I haven't even checked. I should have checked before we recorded.
But the thing is, like with the DataRoots one, I think you could like every round of it progresses, you could update, or you just had to fill it in by then.
I see.
Because the prono I did, I really had to predict the whole
from
the get-go.
Yeah. But I think it's like, so, well, we're talking about the Euro, right? So the way the Euro is set up, there are different groups. And then I think the first 2 of each group goes through. But then some third places also go through. Something like this, no?
4 out of 6 places also advanced.
So I guess it's like, predicting the actual matches, like who's going to play against who and the outcome is super unlikely.
It's insane. Even the thirds. Like it depends on how many goals they scored and stuff. So it's impossible to have them.
Maybe also talking about the group stage. I think this Euro, it was the first time ever that after the second round, all the teams in the group were tied, right? Belgium, Romania, Slovakia, and Ukraine.
Yeah.
They all had the same. I think it was the first time ever as well. They have 4 points, right? Because
after the third, even right? Was after the third. It was after the entire group stage in our group, in the Belgium group. It was just everybody was tied at the end.
Because I was explaining to my partner like who's gonna classify, because she's Romanian, right? So she was it was the second time I think Romania, or maybe first time since 2000 and something, that Romania actually goes through, and I think maybe the first time that they go to the next phase. So she was super like, oh yeah, we're gonna go through, or we're not gonna go through. But the points are times and I was like, no, there's a system. Usually goes this, then it goes how many goals you scored, how many goals you conceded, and how many yellow cards, how many this.
There were 2 teams that like the deciding factor between them was like a qualifying game they played,
at some point,
and even there was tied, and it was something like they had to go to like criterion number 6 of.
But in the end, they didn't go to that because one of the teams got a yellow card in the 90th minute or something. And they were out.
It's crazy. It's crazy. But who did you have? Because you mentioned England and Portugal, you had it on the final. Who did you have, Tim? Or I don't know if you actually picked anyone, but before the tournament started,
I didn't do a prono on the bracket. But my guess was just France.
Just France.
France. Yeah.
Okay.
Because just the way that they were able to, and they showed it as well during the championship, the way that they were able to like ice games. Mm-hmm. They do that so good. They weren't like Spain was just better, but just in the mentality that they have in winning games is the way that they became world champion, and still like in terms of talent.
Indeed. I actually, so maybe share another tab now. Another prediction was from the Q Leuven Research Center, right? Just kind of skipping a bit through. I think we covered this last time as well. They had Germany and France on the final, and France winning, so doesn't really disagree with what you were saying, Tim. Before the tournament started, I thought France, I thought England actually, and I thought Germany. Those are the 3. I don't follow football as closely to these days, but Spain I think definitely surprised me. I think also when you look at the roster as well, it's like they have some names that I know, but like a lot of them are really young. A lot of them, but like they play really really well together.
Yeah.
And I think one thing also that I hear from these national competitions, that it's way harder because the players don't train together the whole time, right? So I think sometimes like even if you have big names, but even if you have like 5 big names, but in their current teams the people are set up to play for them, that wouldn't happen as well on the national team.
I think what you see as well is that especially with France, it's become really clear in the tournaments that you in club football you have like teams that are just really constructed, as in you really like by buying players here and there and then training some players here and there, you get a team that is usually they're more balanced. And then in these kinds of teams and France, for example, in their midfield they had like 3 6 8 players, like not a creative kind of midfielder. It was very difficult. Only when Griezmann dropped back then you saw that. And I think that's in general as well what you see in international football, because you cannot sort of, oh yeah, we want Ronaldo to be a Belgian now. No, like, you're stuck with the players that have your nationality, and then you get way more unbalanced teams where you have to make a distinction. Kamavinga is a really good player, Tchouaméni is a really good player, Kanté is a really good player, but they're all sort of the same profile, like these runners, these breakers, defenders. And then you don't have the creativity, and I think it was at some point in Philippe Joos that said it, one of the commentators. He said like the coach is really trying to do the best he can, but he just doesn't have. You don't have the players. You don't have the same balance as you do in club football.
It's not like, I think in club football you can kind of say, I want my team to work like this, and then you can find the right pieces. Yeah. And I think in national teams is a bit the opposite. It's like, this is what I have. Yeah. What can we do?
Yeah, I also think the thing with national teams is you kind of feel pressure to pick your best players, right? Yeah. It's difficult to say like, okay, this guy, I saw it with England yesterday, like Kane, he scored like 40 goals at Bayern this year, and he's playing like super deep, and I'm like, play him to his strengths, right? But then, or don't play him.
Yeah.
So it's difficult to pick those players which fit your system, if that means dropping maybe a big name player.
Yeah. We saw it with Belgium as well. Yeah. Like Openda fit way better with the system with Lukaku. Yeah. You play.
Indeed. And I think we mentioned like he feels this, and sometimes it's not super objective. We're going to touch a bit more on that as well. Because Lukaku, I think one thing that I always feel like he makes a presence on World Cups, but during the rest of the year, I never hear much about him. You know? I feel like now he's in Inter, but I think like last World Cup, he's
at Roma.
He's at Roma. Yeah. But he was in Inter before.
He was at the year before. He left there on really nice terms.
But I also think there's also like some players like I think there's some goalkeepers as well that they go crazy well, you know, like, and I also think there's a bit
Pickford is a clear example. You don't hear anything from him when he's at Everton, and then he's playing for England.
But to be honest, even for England, I was like, man, like, he's an okay goalkeeper, right?
Yeah, but he's funny.
But you know what I'm saying? Like, but I think he's like, I think in 2014, the U.S. goalkeeper, I think Howard. He did crazy good. Yeah. The Mexico goalkeeper as well, Ochoa. I think he was doing super. Like during the year, we don't see as much, and I do think there's a bit of can these players, how do they deal with pressure? Right? And I think sometimes it's a bit hard to say, okay, you have this guy that is a star, or even like Lukaku, but he has a track record. Like maybe this other guy's playing well, but maybe for a very short-term competition, maybe he's going to do super great, you know. So it's a bit unpredictable. I think it's very hard to predict these things.
In the NBA, they call these like floor raisers or ceiling raisers. Like the people you have people that can really play exceptionally at a high level, but not always that consistently. And they're like ceiling raisers. Like at the top, they can make your top better. They can make the absolute best of your team, make it better. And then you have the sort of floor raisers. I think Kanté is a very clear example of like a floor raiser. He's always going to be super consistent. You know what you got in him, and he's just going to make the team. The worst your team can be, he's going to make it better. Like you're not going to be worse than that just because he's there. But he's not going to make, the best France better. He's going to be an essential part of it, but he's not going to make it better. That's where Mbappé comes in. And I think you have these kind of players that can be, because of their unpredictability, they can be great, and they're going to be ceiling raisers for a specific tournament. They're going to make it because the coincidence and just the great shape and whatever comes, they're going to be the ceiling raisers.
And can you quantify, like can you quantify, I mean, you mentioned NBA, and we talked a bit before we started recording that NBA in general has way more statistics. Is there like a metric or something in the NBA that they use? Or is it more like feeling, or how do they actually say this guy's a ceiling raiser or a floor raiser?
In the NBA, way more than in, because especially now, like in the NBA, there is not as much position anymore. There's a very large shift towards positionless basketball, so they're trying to have metrics that sort of represent the impact of people, and what you can see, like there's metrics that are like, there's a metric called LeBron. The metric is called LeBron because it's, it tried to capture what the value was of LeBron versus Michael Jordan, and this metric is used as sort of but there's also box plus minus, whatever. Like there's different metrics that try to represent the individual impact a player has which is very difficult in soccer because you have the positions and different positions already have a different impact. So, but there you could just look at the impact this person has in in an individual game, and then the variability on that. Like if there's on a specific game, it's like super high, but there's also super lows, and then you have players that have a very steady impact because they all in basketball. Then you have like players like Drew Holiday, who's a very just like similar to Conte, defensive, disciplined, does all the right things, all the dirty work. These kinds of players super valuable, and you can see it in any kind of sports. You always need these, but that's the way you could try to measure. I'm not sure if it is done. I don't know to that extent because it doesn't hold a lot of value, I think, to teams to classify somebody as a ceiling raiser or a floor raiser. But that is the way that you would measure it in basketball.
Okay, cool. Maybe now there are different ways to measure like players. Now we're talking about individual players, and I want to move on there. But just before we do, I just wanted to wrap up a bit of discussion on the predictions. We also internally at DataRoots, we're also commenting a bit on this. One thing that someone mentioned, I think it was Nick, another data engineer, he was mentioning that the predictions seem very much aligned with how expensive the players were. Yeah. And then when you look into the actual predictions, right? So the first thing they said is the ELO rating. So the ELO rating, I think, is like each team in this case has a score, and then if you have a high score, you have a expectation that you're going to win, I guess. And if you don't win, then I guess you lose a lot of points. But if you confirm that expectation, you win a little bit of points. So it's a bit like these point systems, right? So they actually computed the ELO rating for the recent international match results, right? Which I think makes sense. Then they have individual offensive and defensive ratings. So teams go score and concede in recent games. And then, basically it's not easy, but et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And not so surprisingly, they include the cumulative market value from transfer market. So I don't know how much this weighs in the predictions, right? But I mean, it would be interesting to see a breakdown, right? How much that contributed to this prediction. But
there's such a strange bias there in the cumulative market value. Like a player like Modric is a clear issue with that. Like Modric is not going to be a valuable player at this point. He's 36, 37. Yeah. His value on something like Transfermarkt is not going to be a lot because a team is not going to pay 80 million anymore for Modric because he's that old. True. But in terms of impact, if you're able to measure sort of the individual impact of a player, I don't know if there's metrics in that in soccer. Like the forward passes, the assists, the crosses, the accuracy of passing, all these kind of things sort of combined into a metric. Modric would be super high in that still.
Yes, maybe. We also brought it. I didn't put it on the list, but you mentioned like a metric. One thing that I've seen that I thought was pretty interesting is also from the Leuven research, which is the VAPE, is the valuing actions by estimating probabilities, and I think it's somewhat similar to what you were saying. So like, basically they compute the probability that an action contributes to a goal, right? So I think the example here, and I have a video, is that there is people on the baseline and then they pass sideways, basically. Actually, maybe I don't know if this is the best visualization here. Maybe this is better. So they have like let's say a 4-action sequence. There is a pass that is sideways from the defenders, right? And that's arguably a very easy pass. So in statistics, sometimes they just say that's a pass completed, but that's a very easy pass. And then there's a through ball from 2 to 3 that puts someone in the edge of a corner. So that pass is also just a completed pass, but increases a lot the probability of scoring a goal, right? And then actually there's a cross in the middle, and then it's a shot. So then once they know that it was a goal, they kind of back propagate and attribute the value back, right? And the idea is that they try to do this with every action in the game. Yeah. So I think even in the presentation we saw from Leuven actually, they were showing how just using the quote unquote simple statistics, you see a lot of players' value going high, but then once you apply this framework, like Kevin De Bruyne was super valuable because the actions that he does, even if he doesn't have this high percentage of completed passes, the passes that he does complete are super valuable, right? So I thought it was a very interesting and very data-driven way of assessing these things. Yeah. And actually, maybe while I'm talking about this,
maybe first question I have is: Does this have any way to represent off-ball actions?
I think so. It depends a lot, and I think it's a bit intrinsic to football that the way that they gather data is literally someone watching a game and annotating these things, right? But even if you say a pass, is a pass where? There's a lot of information you need to capture, right? If you're manually annotating. I don't remember if they have off-ball actions. Maybe they do.
I'm just saying, like, there used to be players. I'm not sure if you still have the archetype, but like the Alessandro Del Piero archetype, where you have somebody who's just always at the right time and the right spot and it's a skill, right?
Yeah.
To read spaces but it's very difficult to put into a mathematical model.
Yeah, I agree. I also feel a bit about that about Ronaldo, to be honest.
Ronaldo, yeah.
Because I feel like a lot of
to be a player like that.
Yeah, I think in the beginning of his career he was way more of a playmaker and whatnot. But I think the years that he was scoring a lot of the goals were like tap-ins or headers or something. And a lot of times it's like, he was just tapping it in, right? But at the same time, to be in that position, to do these things, like it does take a lot of judgment calls, and it's not easy, yeah?
No.
Indeed. So let me see if they have... I'm not sure, Tim. Maybe I have to...
If I remember.
It's also difficult to create these models. Like, it's very arbitrary. Like, what do you include into a model that sort of represents the impact of the player?
Yeah. And I also think that every time you make a decision like that, you're also including your bias in a way.
Yep.
Right? Because you're saying that this feature you don't include, so even if it is valuable, you're not...
Most of my thinking on this subject is like shaped by the Thinking Basketball podcast. And they do a very interesting thing there where they sort of rank players according to their impact metrics. And then you look into, does this make sense? Like, does this make sense? Does the eye test, if we ask 20 people to rank these players, does it hold true to the impact metrics that we see? And then you often see outliers, and you're like, okay, is this player, does he or she, do they have the narrative against them because of some things that happen off the court, which happens as well? Like, is that why people like them less? Or is they're just a part of the game that we overrate? Like, somebody who scores a lot, is that a good player, or is the person who provides them with the pass that a good player? And
it's difficult.
Yeah, and I do think in football the build-up for a goal is super
complex.
It's really complex. It's really quote unquote long, right? I think in basketball it's still semi-complex, but it's still shorter. If you look at baseball, it's even shorter. And I think the shorter it is, the more direct or less complex in a way the analytics. Like, if you look at Moneyball and all these things, it's you can almost be a scout and not watch any match. What I think that's a bit unthinkable for football, right?
That's
I mean,
you don't like baseball, do you? That's how you say it.
But it happens, and they try to apply the Moneyball principles to basketball. I think today you could not apply them to soccer, like, not at all. You could try and adopt some of them and try to be a bit more data driven, but today you cannot run soccer by no means. And there's a dimensional problem as well. We talked about it during lunch with Jonas Soon as well. Shout out, Jonas. There's on baseball, you have basically two people that are involved in an action. Like, there's the pitcher and there's the one that hits it. I think the most important people. You got all the outfielders. I don't know what. I'm not a baseball expert. But like in basketball, you have 10 players, and in soccer you already have 22. Like, there's a dimensionality problem. Like, the amount of coordinates you have to track. And
that's true. But then what about for sports like tennis, for example?
There's a lot of analytics in tennis.
There is, right? But it's not as much as baseball, I would say. Or maybe the reason why maybe I don't hear as much is because tennis is still an individual sport, right? It's not like you're gonna recruit someone for.
So I gave a presentation on that a couple of years ago on RootsConf. There's a number of factors that play into the analytical mindedness of a sport. You have the amount of people, the size of the court, which sort of, and how discrete the sport is. Baseball is super discrete sport. It's not continuous. It's discrete. Because you have like action, stop, action, stop, action, stop, action, stop. Tennis is already more fluent. You have like a number of hits, and it's you don't know how many hits, like how many times the ball is going to get kicked across the field. Soccer is a super fluid sport. Like, you can have 15 minutes of gameplay without stoppage.
Yeah, true.
Without the ball ever going out, so you cannot divided into individual parts, which makes it more difficult to model the game. That's why you can see like the amount of teams in America. Like baseball is almost all the coaches have an analytical background and have a heavy scouting team, and then like it drops off. Like basketball and ice hockey, they sort of have similar complexities to the game, similar amount of players, similar gameplay fluidity. Then it drops down to American football already, although with American football, with the fantasy football, it took a huge increase. And then in soccer, you barely see any of it.
So, are you saying that predicting NBA is going to be easier than predicting football?
Soccer? Football?
Yes.
Just want to make the distinction.
Yes.
Predicting NBA is going to be easier.
Because I think so too. And I was I was looking here. Yeah. I know, right? It's like, no, I didn't find this morning at all. Predict the NBA champion with machine learning. So this is also Medium post, right? So I wanted to look more into it, but what I have gathered is for the last 4 years, they made some predictions and they actually got the last 4 years right. But not only that, they were able to predict the 8 out of the last 10 NBA championships in the last, 8 out of the last 10 years, right? So to me, this was if it is possible, I would imagine, even though, so correct me if I'm wrong here, Tim, but I think that the way the NBA works, there's like 2 conferences, right? The East and West, and I think in the beginning, everyone plays against everyone, or no?
Everybody is,
Everyone against everyone, and then the top of each East or West, the conferences, so there's still like so everyone plays against everyone, and then they have like a knockout stage.
You play, I think, but don't quote me on that one. You play 4 times within conference against a team, inside your conference, and 2 times against a team outside your conference, something like that, in the regular season, and then you have the playoffs, which is a knockout stage within your conference, which ends up a final, the winner of the the Western Conference champions against the Eastern Conference champions.
So there is still a points part, but there is still like a knockout part. Yeah. Right. Which, as we mentioned before, I don't know if we mentioned before. I definitely mentioned before the recording that I think that's also something that is super like an outlier, someone that is not doing good, like maybe the striker is not feeling well, is sick or something. It has a huge impact for Euros, especially because it's a one-match knockout. Yeah. So in the NBA, there's still a knockout, but the person was still able to predict fairly accurately, right? And one of the reasons why I hypothesize, and that's what I wanted to hear from you, is that the knockouts in NBAs are 7 games, right? So even if there is an outlier there, it's still diluted a bit across the multiple matches. They need to win 4. A team needs to win 4 times at least to go through, right?
Yeah, so you have more statistical relevance for starters. There's also another trend in there that is going to make it very much. And I'm wondering how applicable this is to soccer, for example. One of the trends that you see the last couple of years in NBA basketball is the fact that the game speeds up, as in there's more possessions typically per game. They go for shorter possessions, more possessions, and it's statistical reasoning. The better teams want to up the tempo, because the more possessions you have, it's a law of large numbers. The more possessions they have, the more likely that the best team is going to win. So you try to up the tempo. You really, like, as a good team, you really want to up the tempo. And then there's sort of the thing where good teams are built to have a lot of good possessions, and then the less good teams start to look at the good teams to how they build their teams, and then at some point everybody starts upping. You can see the pace increasing, and so the offensive rating goes up.
When you say pacing, you literally mean like pace is the amount of for example, like it would always go down to the amount of seconds it takes for someone for the possession to turn in basketball.
Yeah, they measure it in amount of possessions per game.
Oh wow!
Yeah, and it goes up steadily for a long time.
Any team.
Average, there might be a team sometimes that slows it down because they specifically have a type of basketball that they want to play.
Because they're not as good, so they want to slow it down.
Yeah, it happens. It happens. The Lakers in 2020, they were a very slow-paced team because they had a very good interior defense. So they wanted to sort of constrict it every time to a half-court basketball where this, the features that they had came out really well.
Oh wow!
But because of this, like the statistical models that you have will become more relevant because you're sort of already, by increasing the pace, you're averaging out the noise a bit.
Fair enough.
So each game becomes statistically more relevant. So as a whole, the predictions should also be more easy to make because there's more signal compared to the noise as a machine learning engineer.
Maybe also draw a bit the parallel with football, because in football, it's a bit, I don't know how relevant this is today or how accurate this is today, but I know that maybe a few 4 years ago, whatever, the Spanish way, the tiki-taka, high possession and all these things was really seen as the top, that's which is the opposite of what Tim is saying, because you have less turnovers, right? But it's
but in football it's different because there's no clock running down, right? So as long as you have the ball,
that's true.
Doesn't. So
that's true. You see what you're saying, right? Because actually I heard that argument as well, that one of the reasons why possessing the ball is so good is because it's also a way of defending. If the team doesn't have the ball, they cannot score. Yeah. And then, like you said, the clock runs, right?
But the reason why I wondered, and I wanted to look this up, so I went into the statistics that you can find on the UEFA website, and for the current European Championship, you can find the amount of possessions that teams have, and I think I found it here. So there's, for example, Spain had 123 attempts on goal versus England 75 only. But
in the final now?
No, just in general.
In general.
The entire tournament.
I was going to say 125.
But Spain, for example, also had 411 attacks, possessions, whereas England only had 344. So on the same number of games, they had 70 possessions less. Which means that on average, each game, that's 10 possessions less. They played 7 games. And I wonder, I don't know if there's any statistical relevance. I hope that there's somebody exploring this. But for me, as a neutral supporter, I would love it if there's more possessions, because the fast-paced game where, they go up and down, it's amazing. But it should also, if you have a lot of if you're a good offensive squad, you also want to have a lot of possessions. You want to try a lot of things out. I think.
I also feel I also live in the US, right? And I know that how they feel about soccer. Alex, I know how you feel about soccer as well. It's a very the scoring moments are not as frequent as basketball or football and all these things, right? And in their eyes, it becomes a bit boring.
Yeah.
Right. But then I also think that it becomes way more impactful, right? In basketball, you cannot, every time someone scores, they cannot celebrate like they celebrate football, right? It's not go in the crowd. It's every free throw, fuck yeah,
Take off your jersey, get a technical foul. Second time you do it, you're out.
But and I was also thinking, because you mentioned, you would like to see more actions, right? More back and forth, more things like this. And I was also thinking how. Yeah, I think also that the hardship to predict football is that these things are very, it's not I think if the expectation is that you score 100 points per match, maybe there is also, it makes it easier to predict who's going to win, because statistically these things, they once you get more data, the likelihood of an outlier, the impact of an outlier is smaller. There's
more statistically relevant events in basketball.
Yeah.
The things that you're trying to predict. Which are your outcome metrics in the end? There's an average game in basketball. I think the average offensive rating, which is amount of points per 100 possessions. So they try to normalize for the possessions, because otherwise you cannot compare between error anymore in basketball. The offensive rating, I think it's 118 last year, which is crazy. That means every 100 possessions, and there's roughly 100, a bit more than 100 possessions each game, you get 120 points as a team on average. Each game. That's a lot of things to predict. There's a lot of actions.
Yeah.
Plus the fact that you have only 5 people, so a single action is way easier. It often happens that there's 2 people doing a pick and roll, a single type of action. The other 3 are standing still. Mm-hmm. In soccer, it's almost unthinkable that there's 2 people doing something and the other 9 are just awesome, guys, you do you.
Unless you're Messi, a few years ago.
Messi, Messi and Iniesta, but
yeah, it's true. But I also think it's and I think in football is a bit, maybe in basketball, I think it's also more clear who's active in the play.
Yeah.
And in football, I think it's less clear as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you can argue that in a football action, like everyone's involved actually.
I think
you would ask like
the
Guardiola,
keeper,
he probably has an instruction for every
the keeper standing line.
probably has an instruction for
Yeah.
every player in every situation where he should be, where he.
I think it's like it's less of a. I think the elbow right of influence kind of. It's not like an elbow. It's not like it drops. I think it's more like of a slowly fades out, right? Like someone that is further from the action has, but still, could, right? And you never know, And I think now we're also talking about on the game level, but I think again, if you take more on the competition level, it also becomes. It's the same thing, yeah. For example, I also think it's probably easier to predict the. Who's the winner of a points-based competition than a knockout competition?
Yeah, very simple thing as well. Like I think, and I know, an average basketball season is 82 regular season games, and then you have at least 16 playoff games. So you have on average each season 98 games. That's not like in soccer. You play less, huh?
Yeah,
so you already have less statistical relevance.
That is true. That is true.
So that means that a single sum, like if we've all seen like random goals happening. I think own goal was the top scorer of the European Championship. But like if something like that happens where somebody kicks in a cross and you hit it with your knee and it ends up in the top bin and you're like, yep, all right, this might have a huge impact on the rest of the season. Whereas somebody who accidentally bounces a basketball and it ends up in the
yeah, that's true.
That doesn't have an impact, right?
That's true.
That's in game, but also like because there's 81 other games.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. So I guess it's like, which is statistically makes sense, right? Like when you have more data, the impact of this and that. It's like
we're doing a long run of explaining the law of large numbers.
Yeah, exactly. All right, thanks very much. No,
that was the conclusion of this.
But I also think there's a psychological aspect, right? So one thing we mentioned as well when we were discussing the predictions from Snowflake, Vimel, and the K11 research, someone brought up that this reflects on the complexities of the the complexity of football, which includes the psychological effect on players, I guess. Like you're losing the match, it's 80 minutes. What decisions are you making? And in that, and I think it was the same presentation. You were also there, right, Sander, for the K11 Data Science 11. They also try to quantify the impact of psychological pressure. So the title here is Choke or Shine, Quantifying Soccer Players' Abilities to Perform Under Pressure. I think they took the VAPE, still the framework before, about the decisions and the value the decisions bring. But then from that, they try to say, okay, when it's high pressure moments or low pressure moments, and they split it around. So this is a very short post, but they also have the banner here. But then they kind of say what is high. First, they try to quantify what is high impact, and then there's a before match and after match and during match. So before match is like if you lost the last 3 games, maybe there's a high pressure, right? And there's also the in match, like you got scored at the 80th minute, right? Or this is a final. So they also try to quantify these things. And then they try to see for each player, what's the impact of that? So in terms of making the right decisions and in terms of executing those decisions correctly. And for example, one thing that they see here, and the people that are following the live, that are just on the audio, this is an image of with Neymar. Has some statistics, average contribution per 90 minutes. If it is high pressure, I guess he has higher contribution, I guess. But then it also talks about like how many shots, how many passes, dribbles, and you can see that more actions come when there is I think actually this graph is a bit confusing, but he dribbles more when there's high pressure, and these actions have high ratings, I guess.
It's a player that tries to make stuff happen. Like,
indeed,
so
he tries.
Reflects a bit.
So I think it's like there are players that,
but his contributions drop on average. Like he has a lower average contribution for high pressure situations. Because the density is more moved to the left. Like the bulk of the
I think so. Yeah. I think this graph is a bit confusing. Maybe we can actually open. And I did try to I remember the presentation, and I also was trying to And I remember the conclusion of the presentation is that Neymar chokes under pressure. I'm just gonna ignore that. I'm gonna pretend that I didn't understand that. But there was something like that, right? But they do try to. So I think this is a bit. Now I'm opening up for people following the live stream. This is the banner. So when you do research, you also have like a banner. You present stuff. So I think this is a bit the same. And here they show. This is really laggy. Derive insights about players' performance under pressure. We aggregate his performance metrics under different pressure levels. And then they see what's the actions with high ratings, average ratings, low ratings, and you see amount of passes, amount of shots, and all these things. And then they also kind of flip this around into recruitment, for example, player acquisition, right? The use case here is that you have Mares, so you're trying to find a replacement for that person. And then try to see which players and how do they perform under pressure, right? So which players actually perform very well under pressure, the shot execution, for example, under pressure, which ones are average and which ones are like the contributions over 90 minutes. And then you can also see kind of like, I think they have here somewhere.
Sort of a weird statement to make that you want to have people who perform better under pressure, because there's a reverse statement as well. Like, it's when there's not enough pressure, they don't perform well. Like, you could be Mario Balotelli and be like 90% of the games you're like, man, I don't even want to run. Like, you also don't want to have these kind of like. But Mario Balotelli probably scores really well on this because high pressure moments.
But for example, this guy, for example, they say Giroud. Giroud is a clutch goal scorer. So when there's high pressure, apparently he scores a lot of goals, which is good. But at the same time, it's like the same thing you mentioned with the floor raisers and the ceiling raisers, right? If your team is already good, you also want people that perform well under pressure, because if you like, I think actually Spain is a good example. At least Spain from some years ago, right? They had a very possessed ball style, but if they were falling behind, I feel like they had a hard time converting into goals. But I feel like because they never fell behind, because they always had possession, they were always controlling the game, So I think it's almost like you never get to the high pressure situations because your team, when it's under pressure, performs really well.
Yeah.
See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I think it's a bit of of course, ideally you want someone that performs well under pressure and without pressure, right? But I think in reality, if you have some trade-offs, you kind of need a bit of both players.
Yeah. You can trade off, or you can say like you want people to have sort of robust curves with regards to pressure. Like,
indeed.
They keep executing the same way. That's what I like. I've been a basketball coach for 8 years. That's what I would be looking for, is like a player that when the pressure mounts, they keep executing the way that I expect them to.
Mm-hmm. But I do feel there are some players that perform better under pressure.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, but is that because they're not living up to their potential when there's no pressure?
I don't know.
I don't think so.
I don't know. I mean, okay.
I don't think anybody is like.
But like, for example, Giroud as well.
Like,
I find it an interesting example because he also only got substituted when there was a high pressure.
Voilà.
Like, when he rarely started for Chelsea, so when they need a goal in the final 10 minutes, they put him up top and they just threw balls, long balls. Okay, naturally you're gonna be more impactful, right? If they tailor the game for you.
Yeah.
But I guess it's like there's always the argument of if they put someone else and they threw the ball for that person, they wouldn't score.
Yeah, fair enough.
Right. So it's a bit of.
Yeah, but how large is the statistical sample size in this?
So I don't know.
I hope it's because it's KUL. It's going to be good, probably.
I think so too. Right.
A lot of respect for their statistical analysis.
And actually, I wanted to find someone from that works on the KU research for sports to be with us, but not yet. But one day we'll get them.
I think in these kinds of things, it's also like what is interesting is that you can construct your roster to sort of have people that take up this role.
Yeah.
Like we used to have Dries Mertens in Belgium, who used to, in Belgium, always act as a super sub. Like, and it's, you come on the court.
Super sub is the best, like, backhand slap. Kind of like, it's like, I feel like it's, I don't know how, if someone calls me a super sub, I don't know if I'm going to be happy. Or if I'm going to be like, you're just calling me, like.
I think at some point in Belgium, there was sort of the agreement that Dries Mertens was one of our best players. And yet he was the most valuable for the team coming off the bench.
Yeah, and that actually I have, like, I do think there's some players that need either to come out or they need to go in. Because sometimes, like, in the beginning, the nerves are, once the ball's rolling, there's a psychological thing as well.
I think like if you know that that's your role and you accept and fully embrace that role, there's a liberating part to it mentally where you come on the court and you know they're like, oh, now we expect this from you, and you know like, all right, cool, they're looking towards me. I like this. Like I've been in basketball. I've been in situations where you come on the court and people sort of look at you like, you do this now. And you know, like, okay, it's okay for me to take initiative. Nobody's gonna blame me if I take initiative and it goes wrong because that's why I came on the court. Like, I'm expected to shoot the ball.
But
I'm
there's
expected to
also
cross
an
the
argument
ball.
of why do you need to come off the bench for that? Why can't you just start the match and people just look at you to do the A and B and C?
Because tactics. Like, how many coaches have started to get like France has played the entire tournament like this. Like, we don't want to have against goal. Like you don't want to start by making actions at the midline. Yeah. Because that's not the tactical plan you have in mind. You don't want to lose possession at your own half because it leads to. But at some point, if you're 2-0 behind, then it's perfectly fine to start making actions at half court.
Yeah. No, I agree. Maybe. Sorry.
¿Qué pasa?
There we go. Maybe one other thing I wanted to mention, and I think this is going to be controversial talking to you, Tim, because you're very much into it. But you mentioned like the people that perform well under pressure. I also think of like the buzzer shots in basketball. I also think of like Michael Jordan and all these things. You know, usually there are players who say this is the guy that's going to take the last shot, and usually I think because basketball, I think like the execution time is very short. You know, like you need to be the guy that gets the ball and shoots. You know, it's not like you get the ball, you dribble and this and this. So I feel like the margin for error, like one small mistake also costs a lot, right? And I mean, you know more about basketball than me, but I also get the impression that like Michael Jordan kind of guys, they were the people that perform really well under pressure, better than without pressure. Or maybe I'll rephrase it a bit. The impression I have is that when the games were very high pressure, when the stakes were high, those are the people that really stood out. I don't know if it's because they play better or everyone plays worse and they just kept the same level. But when you look at, when the stakes are high, like what's going to happen, they're the ones that
There's a lot of research that's done into that, and what you see in terms of like if you look at basketball, you see and you look at the sort of the metrics of people in what they call clutch situations. You see that there are players that perform better, but ironically, it's not like I think Michael Jordan is good, but it's not disproportionately a lot better than he usually is better than other players in the court.
But like then I guess he just shows up more because
there's an attention part to it. There's a you remember the situations where it's like Game 6 against the Jazz and he makes the game-winning shot, and that's what you remember. Those are the moments that survive.
I also wonder if there's a like they can be on autopilot and kind of like rest their, you know, like he's like, I'm just going with the flow. I'm just going with it because everything's under control. But things are under control. But I can switch it on.
Yeah, but if you look towards like the percentage, the field goal percentage on average, and in basketball they go really far in that. Like they have not just your field goal percentage, but on open, wide open, or contested shots. Like they track everything for every shot where everybody is. Like they have so many tracking metrics. For example, Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan, they don't have the best field goal percentage on these kind of shots. For starters, you have a super long tail because there's a lot of players that one time in their career they make this shot and then they are the best in this because they have 100%. But Stephen Curry, for example, he's the best shooter of all time. I don't even think that's arguable anymore. He also has the best percentage at that point. There's another like Joe Johnson. He's a way less known player. I think he has at this point the most buzzer beaters, which means that your shot leaves before the buzzer goes and the buzzer goes before it goes through the rim. That's the definition of a buzzer beater. He has the most of them. Like I think he has 9 of them, which is crazy.
Yeah. And
that might be an example of a player that shows up when that is I think one of the only players. There's a number of them that are known for that, and it's like Joe Johnson, Rob Orr. So there are players that tend to show up.
Yeah.
But at some point, I think it's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah, true. That's
True.
true. I think a lot of it is perception as well,
Yeah.
right? So, but that's why I think looking into the numbers and really trying, like, I think it's a very good way to just try to remain objective,
Yeah.
right? In a sport
agree.
that, in an area that is very opinionated.
Yeah, I have a very, like, I'm very opinionated on these kinds of things. And I recently gave a presentation on what businesses can learn from sports analytics, and one of the easiest lessons that you can draw is that the statistics alone are not going to bring you there. We saw that a number of times in the NBA where people sort of just try to look at, the best team is doing this, we're going to emulate the statistics, we're going to build our team according to the statistics. Doesn't work.
Yeah.
The entire Maury Ball era in Houston didn't work.
Yeah.
But you always have to have like the philosophy and the statistics work hand in hand, and there's just a huge survivor bias.
Yeah.
Like this always in sports, it's super prominently present.
Yes, yes. And maybe now to switch gears a bit, in basketball, I think there's more tech in, like, more in the actual, like, in the game itself, like, in the, well, I'm saying this because I think now in the Euro, one thing that stood out a lot is the amount of technology that we're starting to see in the sport, right? The VAR, but also the offside. I think offsides in this Euro was crazy. There was some things that's like the guy's foot is 5 centimeters above, and it's like, man, hell, come on. I think it was Denmark that scored a goal that was against Germany, I want to say.
Exactly.
The handball stuff, so now there are chips inside the ball, and there's the goal line technology, and there's this and there's that. I had a mini discussion. Well, maybe we can to share a bit some things for people that may be following us on video. This is a bit the Spain-England offside, right? So actually not offside, it was inside, right? But they're trying to show a bit the simulations that they did. They drew a line. I think if you go down, they have this like 3D rendering thing here, and you can see the guy's arm is up in front and his knee is actually up in front, and that's why he's onside, right? And then you see some other examples. Let's see this one.
This is
Lukaku, right? And so this was against Romania.
Offside.
He's offside, right?
Look at his
Because
toe.
but like the arm doesn't count.
Huh?
No,
the arm doesn't count.
It's only the body parts that you can score with.
To me, it's crazy. Yeah. It's like, come on, man. The guy's like, look at this, man. Like,
Like
look at his foot, bro.
If his feet were like a size.
If he cut his nail, his toenails that day, you know, he would.
His knee as well, His knee as well.
Yeah, that's true. His knee as well.
I said that yesterday about the goal of Oyarzabal. Is like the exact moment of your stride. Like if you if you happen to be like one leg extended, one leg behind, you probably will not be offside because the other person is with the knee forward. Like that's the point where, you know, it's crazy that it just depends on, and you cannot time it if you try to kick across.
It's very
like
dynamic.
It's impossible.
Because I feel like in American football sometimes, because you like the rules are very clear as well. Like for touchdowns or whatever, you need to have both feet on the ground. But then you see like players catching, and you can see they're clearly dragging their feet on the ground, so they really move like they almost like a dance, you know. They do this thing, but I think in football it's so dynamic that it's like
you can't.
It's impossible.
Really, it's impossible.
The tippy toes in football is one of the most beautiful things. The fact that they drag their toes.
But maybe this. I had a mini discussion with Vitaly. Do you like this technology in football? Maybe we can just do a quick. Do you think this adds to the sport?
This one I think I do, because like for me offside is black and white.
Okay.
So I think everything that helps in making that decision.
Okay, we're gonna move to some other ones, but and what about you, Tim?
I think I do love these technologies, but in the case that you adjust the rule book alongside with it, as in you have technology to very much black and white decide if something is offside, make it that there's also no room for interpretation.
Yeah.
Either you do that, or you leave it up to interpretation, but then you leave the technology out of it as well. Because if you don't have the combination of the two, like it leads to frustrating. And one of the examples is I don't know if you have it, the goal of Openda, where he like touches the ball, but like very slightly with the hand. And there was a discussion when the goal happened. There was a discussion, obviously in Belgium journalism afterwards, where I think some people said like you have to. It has to be a voluntary movement, which I think obviously is not a voluntary movement. You have to drastically change the trajectory. Like you have to impactfully change the trajectory of the ball, which obviously doesn't. Like, and then it's the question like,
Yeah,
I think that
no.
was just a wrong call, right?
But but I see what Tim's point is. Like, I guess what he's saying is like either you say a touch is a touch and that's it, and if you happen to touch your hand inside the
That's
box, it's
kinda
a
what we
penalty and
do.
it sucks.
Right.
Yeah. But other, if you say like intentional, not intentional, but then you have this technology that kind of supports saying, yeah, it did touch, but now you have to say it's intentional, it's not intentional. That I think is a bit weird.
The goal of the Netherlands against England, where Xavi Simons was against England, right? Xavi Simons kicks it like super hard, and there's
It's against France, the one
against France. Yeah, they disallowed it, and like there's a guy standing there, and everybody knows that the keeper is not going to get
Yeah,
it. Like
fair
the
enough.
ball was, I think, 120 kilometers an hour from inside the box. Like nobody's going to the keeper didn't even react.
Yeah.
But then there was a guy standing next to him, and in some interpretation of the rule book, you could say that if he dives, like
crazy.
he jumps against the player, so he's influencing. And then you're like, yeah, okay.
But that's because of offside or what?
It's because of offside.
Yeah, because I guess in offside there is a bit of subjectivity
Yeah.
in if the guy interferes with the play, right? So, for example, if I'm clearly passing the ball to you, Tim, and you're offside, but then you didn't touch the ball because maybe you weren't fast enough, which for Tim is a bit hard to think, but anyway. And then let's imagine the ball goes in and it's a goal, right? Somehow, because the ball was a pass to you, you interfere in that play, and therefore that's offside. But it's not like this is a very, hypothetical black and white example, but it doesn't have to be as objective, right? Like maybe I do a through ball and maybe there are two players and one is offside, the other one is not, and maybe the ball goes through, or maybe how do you...
Mm-hmm. But that's also why I think you can't, like, I see how you see the rules have to follow if you implement stuff like this, but you can't. I mean, you can make a handball black and white. You just can't.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or you do. That's what they do in hockey.
Yeah.
Hockey is like, and I think there's way less discussion in hockey. Yeah? It's like it hits your foot. It hits your foot. Like you have to. It's your responsibility to make sure it doesn't hit your foot.
But I think in football, isn't there a rule that like if your hands is near your body, it's not a handball?
But then it's gray.
Near?
No, like okay, maybe
but then it's a gray area
if
again.
we say it's in contact,
But then it's a gray area again.
But how? It's touching. Is it touching? Not touching. Look, it's touching. It's not touching. Like this.
This guy.
Oh, I even clicked on something. I see what you're saying. Yeah, I think it's I don't know. I feel like to me the accuracy of these devices is a bit questionable. You know, when I see the guy with like a little foot. Even like in Brazil, there was a joke that like they zoomed in and you can see the cells and like two cells were above the line. It's offside, you know. But to me, that's where that's where I have a bit of a like, come on, man, like just let them play. You know.
The thing is also like the thing I dislike the most is like VAR was intended to solve like clear and obvious errors made by referees. If you have to use a microchip inside the ball to check whether someone touched it.
It's not a clear
don't
error.
bother, right? I mean,
yeah, that's true. That's true.
Or you completely automate it away, but make a choice.
This is the chip you're saying, right, Sander? I think you sent it's from Adidas.
Yeah. So
there's literally a chip inside.
Yep.
That
every touch of the ball, like 500 times a second, you get data. So every touch of the ball, you record.
And I think this is also the example, right?
This I wanted to show specifically.
So basically, Ronaldo said that he scored a goal, but the signals
shows,
in the ball says that Ronaldo did not touch at all. Yeah. So close, but not close. So he's a liar. Cristiano Ronaldo, we're calling you out.
You heard it here first.
Well, not here second, right? Because this is the article. But anyways,
we got the scoop over Sky Sports.
Yeah,
nice guys.
Yeah. But I do think it's I think those. Yeah, I see what you're saying.
I think it's interesting, and for stuff like this, it's fun to use and to put a sensor in the ball and stuff, but it shouldn't be used for decision making of the referee like a sensor inside the ball.
Yeah, maybe. I'm not sure.
The only thing which is nice about the sensor is you can identify the exact point of contact for like offside decisions, because that's always like also did the ball already leave the field or not.
That's
it's also
true.
Always a point of discussion.
We didn't see that in this. We didn't see that data used like that, right?
But that's what the semi-automated offside does. It also uses the chip.
So tell us about it. Tell us more about it. What is the semi-automated thing? I'm going to put on the screen here.
Well, so basically, there's like 12-ish cameras across the stadium. They hang from the roof, and they track every player with like 29 body points at any point in time. So basically, they just track you at any point in time, and these body points are across your body and are the ones which are relevant for scoring goals.
Okay, so this is a video from FIFA for people following the live stream. From FIFA, so it's not like a research group or anything.
No, it's actually
Yeah. So this exists, but they're trying, right? So now they have the sensor to see where the.
So yeah, the sensor of the ball then makes it you can identify the exact point of contact when the ball leaves or the first contact is made with the ball.
Okay. And I also wonder, like these 3D simulations. I feel like that's what people think programmers do. You know, like you have like 3 screens and like this, and then you have the bug going through the wire. You know, and then it goes through the internet or something. Really
Isn't
cool.
that what you do, man?
Yeah, I do it. I don't know what Sander's
I keep
doing.
selling the wrong thing.
It's okay, really cool. And then I guess you have all the cameras with. Oh wow!
But like the thing here is like what I always wonder is like you see these body points, right?
Yeah.
Some people, some players are bigger than other players.
Whoa, you're fat shaming?
Excuse me.
More muscular.
He has thicker bones.
No, but do they adjust the model based on the player in question?
Yeah.
I think so.
That's cool.
Yeah, I was also thinking about that, right? Like today we have a referee running around, but I was thinking like, oh yeah, okay, there's some offside examples. What if actually was this used in the Euro or no?
This one?
Yeah. The semi-automated, okay. I'm also wondering, like we have referees that run around basically, and there's actually a lot of training where to position yourselves and whatnot. Do you think in the future we'll have a pure VAR?
I don't think so. You need someone.
But you could, huh? You could, because you have like a camera. I mean, you still have someone to blame, but just that they're not on the pitch.
But then, like, what do you do if things get heated? Like, 2 players start pushing each other.
Let it happen, bro. I mean, what does the referees do?
If they die, they die.
They take their ears off and just like, come on.
Yeah, I know.
They don't do nothing. Like, I'm from Brazil, man. I've seen things like they don't do much. Like if dust how do you say it? Dust comes the shovel or something. That's Alex.
Push comes to shove.
Yeah, okay. Push comes to shovel. Thanks. I looked at it. I was like, Alex, help me. It's okay. When the time comes, they don't do much either. So just
You didn't use it the second time around, did you?
no, I didn't. I was too embarrassed. My brain, my mouth was ahead of my brain. I was like, yeah, I shouldn't have started with that.
But there's times at which I do also think, like, what's the guy still on the pitch for? Like, literally, like with the VR, for example, it's like people 50 kilometers away that say, go watch the screen.
Yeah. Or even like the linesmen as well, huh?
Yeah. Exactly.
They're just going sideways. If it's just a camera, if it's just a camera and then someone's really just controlling with a stick, that you can move faster than whatever that guy is doing.
Yeah. You could automate the whole thing.
Yeah, right. Oh yeah. Maybe one last final question. We're talking about like predicting stuff with AI and the impact of technology in sports. I had a discussion with my friends a while ago that we're talking about the point system versus knockouts, right? Knockout stages, right? So in the UK or in England, you have the Premier League and you have the FA Cup, which I always thought was funny that everyone says FA Cup, but the first time I heard it was like fuck up, and I was like, anyways. And I remember we were talking about like which one do you prefer. That's kind of what the discussion was about, and then in the end we kind of agreed that point systems are more fair. The best team usually wins in point systems. But knockouts are more exciting because it's unpredictable.
Mm-hmm.
So then I guess it kind of, to bring this back to this discussion is, even if we could, like, is it a good thing? Like, I think usually we say we're predicting and this and it's not fair and this is usually seen as maybe a bad thing. But isn't that part of what is exciting about sports?
Yeah.
The fact, the unpredictability of it. Like, if everything was really, like, if all the predictions that we did from either Snowflake or the research center from KU Leuven were correct, would that be good? Is that a good thing or is that a bad thing?
So that's where the conversation, like we had this conversation. I mentioned to Sander before that so basketball has become rather predictable, as you've shown before. Like 8 of the 10 last NBA championship winners could have been predicted based on the data available at that point. And the popularity of basketball has been dwindling. Like it's going down. Like there's less people watching. There's more people watch the Caitlin Clark NCAA final in women's basketball than they did the final in NBA basketball.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So it is for like a lot of people are criticizing that it is because of the fact that it's been very analytics driven. And it's analytics driven in two ways. Like on the one hand, what the NBA tried to do was make it really popular by introducing all these rules where people scored more, which is why like at some point you can like there was at some point they introduced the hand checking rule. Like if you touch somebody in front of you with your hand, it's a foul. Which very much limits you as a defender in what you can do in terms of steering somebody. And then they introduced sort of there's like James Harden went with fouls at some point all the way. Like he always jumped into the defender who was standing still and was a foul. Like you had to jump backwards. Like a lot of rules were introduced where it made it more difficult on the defense and better on the offense. People really went away from it. Like they really didn't like it because everything became a scoring festival. Like it wasn't special anymore. And then this year they introduced some rules where defense again got some power back. And you saw that people, again, the viewing numbers went up, but still the playoffs were rather predictable. Everybody thought Celtics were going to win. Celtics won. Voila. There's more to it, obviously, and the popularity is still not picked up from, couple of years ago. So the unpredictability, the what is it, the Cinderella story, like the small team comes up and wins big, those kind of stories, sports needs it. Like it's obvious. Like you need to have the Leicester story once in a while, the Union story, although Union is not even
close.
It's not even, but like you need these stories because otherwise teams lose out.
But if you have too many of these stories,
but that won't happen, right?
If you have, there's the economies of scale part. Manchester City proves it year in year again. Real Madrid proves it year in year again. But if you have too many of these stories, then you also lose out. That's also what.
Because I feel like, I guess the thing is like if you have too many of these stories, then maybe the rules are not fair. The rules are not like, because you still want somehow that the best team will win.
NBA was more popular when Golden State Warriors won like 4 times in 5 years. Than it is now. Now do we have 5 times a different champion the last 5 years in NBA? So maybe there is a like we do like, and that's what they say in the US as well. We do like dynasties.
Yeah,
we do like Real Madrid and the legendary Galacticos. And
true. What do you think, Sander? What are your thoughts on that?
I do agree. Those if it not the NBA part. No, but I think like it's nice to have these unpredictable games or champions once in a while, but I do think, you would also not feel fair if you are the best team and that's not somehow represented in you getting rewarded for it at the end of the road. So,
Cool. Guys, thanks a lot. This was fun. Thanks, Tim. That wasn't a good clap. Let's see if it's that was...
Man, it was just closer to the mic.
Tim, stop with excuses. Thanks, yo. Thanks, Alex.
You have taste in a way that's meaningful to software people.
Hello, I'm Bill Gates.
I would recommend TypeScript. It writes
super cool guy.
A lot of code for me, and usually it's slightly wrong.
I'm reminded, incidentally, of Rust here.
Rust.
This almost makes me happy that I didn't become a supermodel.
You said that, man.
Cooper and Netties.
Well, I'm sorry, guys. I don't know what's going on.
Thank you for the opportunity
Much
to
rather
speak to
be
you
a
today
data engineer
about
than
large neural networks.
obviously.
It's really an honor to be here.
Rust.
DataTopics.
Welcome to the data.
Welcome to the DataTopics podcast.